Let's talk bass tones. Today I've put together a little experimental session and I'm attempting a Joel Wanasek inspired metal bass tone. This is something that Joel has posted a few times that he uses in a lot of his recordings. And it involves a split bass tone, which is a very common technique. Basically, it has two parts. There's a bass tone, which has gone through all the amps and processing that the player likes as a sound. And then there's a sine bass, which is a synthesized sine wave bass that's programmed to match the notes of the bass line and play in unison. So the tone sounds like this. And the low sine wave sounds like this. So when you put a low pass on the sine wave at about 250 hertz and you take only the low end information, and on the tone track you put a high pass at about 150 or 200 hertz and you take only the mid-range and attack information, when you combine the two, you get clarity on the low end and punch and grit and character on the high end. Massive, right? But I found another way to do this that's arguably more interesting, could give you a preferable result, and is more closely tied with the original performance of the player. So what I'm doing is I'm doing my version of the sine bass track. Instead of using a synth sine bass, I am taking the DI track. So you always split your bass and you take a direct signal. And here it sounds like this. This is just the bass guitar going straight into the interface. Which sounds pretty cool because that's a Warwick bass and they're awesome. But what I've done is I've used a pretty uncommon tool called EX Subfilter from Brainworx, and this is a low-end enhancer. So what it does is it goes into that signal of the DI bass and it really enhances the low end and pushes it, and it sounds like this. Right, without and with. Just brings that rumble out. So if you treat this the same way as you treat the sine bass, you put a low pass on and you blend it in with the tone, you get this. Right? All the grit, all the aggression, and all the rumble at the same time. And you're using only the original signal from the player without adding anything artificial. And to me, that gives it just a really live and authentic feeling because it is derived from the actual performance. You may want to use a little bit of sine bass just to add a consistency of the low end if you really want that completely flattened kind of low end feeling where everything is totally tight at the bottom. You can play with this to taste. But where it really shines is when you bring in drums, you have a lot of compression, and you make it real loud, and it sounds like this. So that's one approach to metal bass that you might want to try, using a tool you might have never heard of, EX Subfilter. Now, I know Brainworx is in trouble financially, so we'll see what happens in the future, but if you're able to grab a copy of Subfilter, I highly recommend trying it for your bass tracks, especially in metal. Later. Hey everybody, I don't normally do this, but if you wouldn't mind, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to do this YouTube thing with a little more consistency and grow the channel, so every little bit of interaction I see encourages me to keep going and keep up the momentum. Thank you very much for your time and have a great day.